I had the pleasure of sitting down with Crista Haynes, a family lawyer with the Haynes Law Firm in Redlands, California. We talked about her journey into law and the values that matter most to her.
The Haynes Law Firm came to fruition actually in 2018. Slowly but surely, we were able to get our name out there, and I guess our hard work spoke in volumes.
We also spoke about entrepreneurship and doing business in the Inland Empire.
I wholeheartedly believe that the Inland Empire, San Bernardino and Riverside counties are the best place to practice. There is no better business knowledge that you're going to get than to jump in head first and, get your feet wet. And that's what we did.
We talked about her practice and what sets the Haynes Law Firm apart.
Coming into my law firm, you're going to speak to real people. You're going to have one-on-one time with me as a lawyer.
And now, dear friends, here's Crista Haynes. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We know each other from BNI, and you are the family lawyer, and we're going to get to the law part today, but we're going to talk more about you. You don't have a lot of appearances in the media, so I was wondering if you can tell me more about your childhood. How did you grow up and where?
I've always lived in California. I actually grew up in Oak Hills, which is on the top of the Cajon Pass off of the 15. My parents still live there now. They've had the house from before I was born until now. I grew up there, went to the same school district until I graduated from high school, and then immediately went to Cal State Long Beach. From Cal State Long Beach, I got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice, where I thought that I wanted to work for the FBI in crime scene analysis and crime scene investigation. But I graduated at 21 years of age, and I was too young to apply, and so I didn't know what to do next. And so that's kind of how I stumbled on to going to law school.
That's awesome. I think of my job as a storyteller. So I really curious to kind of tell the inside story behind you making these micro decisions over time that led you to where you are right now. And so I'm thinking about this child who went to college. All right, first off, how did you choose a major?
So I actually made quite a large decision when I was 17 years old. Prior to turning 17, I actually thought that I was going to be an architect when I grew up, or at least that's what I wanted to do. I spent a lot of my childhood designing houses and doing actual blueprints for homes. Not a lot of children do that for fun. However, I did. I actually made blueprints for my aunt's home in Texas that she was able to give to the builder. They got them up to code, and she was able to build one of my designs out in Dallas, Texas. But when I was 17 years old, my best friend died in a tragic accident, and there was a multi-jurisdictional investigation with San Bernardino County Sheriff, Los Angeles County Sheriff, as well as CAL FIRE, wherein they did an investigation into a car accident where my best friend passed away. And they got into a multi-jurisdictional lawsuit to kind of finger pointed at each other because there were so many things that went wrong, that I made a determination at that time that I didn't want that to occur for other people. And watching my best friend's mom go through that was really hard. It was so screwed up that it really affected her ability to actually go after any one of the jurisdictions based off of their failures. They argued for 47 minutes while she was still under the car. And because they argued who was supposed to get her out, she perished, and she only perished from asphyxiation, which means that she died because she couldn't breathe, not because of internal injuries. And that's because no one did anything.
Wow. How many people know about this story?
I think that a lot of people know the story from probably college because everyone kind of wanted to know why I went into criminal justice. And a lot of people knew about it on my senior year because I did a lot of charity work with her mom, as well as the school, to be able to create a charity in her name. And I was an advocate at 17 years old for her mom, who obviously was the actual adult in the situation, but she was grieving so much that I helped to advocate with regards to the lawsuits and helped walk her through it. So I realized that I didn't want anyone else to have to go through that. And so that's what made me change to go into criminal justice.
So this incident that happened to your best friend changed your trajectory from architecture to law.
Yes. Well, again, at that time, I thought that I was going to go into the field of crime scene investigation to be able to help people actually solve crimes and to solve exactly what happened. Because not only was there a multi-jurisdictional element to the situation, there were two other girls in the car who both lied to law enforcement. And because law enforcement had this other multi-jurisdictional argument, nothing really came to be, and no one to this day actually knows exactly what happened, because you have two versions from two different girls. You have three different versions from three different jurisdictions, and you have the witnesses that saw it from hundreds of yards away. They could only see a vehicle rolling and the dust cloud that occurred afterwards. And I didn't want parents, loved ones, wives, children to have to not know what happened. And so I wanted to go into crime scene investigation. But upon graduating with my bachelor's in criminal justice, I was 21 years old, and I was instructed that if I wanted to work for the FBI, I needed to be 25. And so I didn't really know what to do for 4 years. I didn't want to work for local jurisdictions. I really wanted to kind of get into the crime lab that was being built at that time in Las Vegas, but I was too young. So I pivoted and decided to go to law school. And I thought that I would ultimately go into criminal law, but through my schooling at law school, as well as what I did for volunteering and doing some externships, I decided that criminal law was interesting, but I was actually more in tuned for business law during law school, which in turn did not actually keep my interest very long. After I volunteered at the Rancho Cucamonga Self-Help Center, which no longer exists because Rancho is now only a criminal courthouse, I realized how much I could actually help people in that realm and how much it kind of clicked within what I was doing. And so I ultimately have landed in family law, but that also took a wide turn because I graduated from law school in 2011. And at that time, we were still in the very large thick of the recession. A lot of really large law firms were laying off hundreds of attorneys. They were closing multiple locations nationally as well as internationally. And public entities such as the DA's office, the public defender's office, the Workers' Compensation Board were on a complete hiring freeze that lasted for 2 years after I passed the bar. And so at that point, after having passed the bar and gotten sworn in, I decided that my best option was to go out on my own and to figure it out from there.
Right from college?
Yes, right from college. I was sworn in on December 1st, 2011, and my old business partner and myself hung our shingle, so to speak, on December 4th. Wow. 2011.
Hey everybody, just quick break from the episode to ask you, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do. It will help us a lot. Also, the best way to support this channel is by sharing this episode with someone who might find it interesting. And now back to the conversation. What is story? I'm not joking. But my question to you is that during college, how much did the best friend tragedy stayed with you, kept you motivated in tough times? Because law school is no joke. I mean, when you're studying law, you have to do a lot of overnights, and a lot of people give up law school. So would you say that that tragedy that happens in your life kept you motivated?
I would say that the tragedy that I went through at, a relatively young age, definitely helped shape who I am and, motivated me to completely pivot and change my life trajectory. However, even prior to that, it was a part of my role as her friend to kind of always be the motivating factor for both of us. So it always was in the back of my mind that, Sarah would have wanted me to do this. And so just to continue moving forward, because I was always the one to try to motivate her. We had actually gone to college recruiting events together, and I tried to convince her that college was the way to go. And we had made plans prior to her passing to do that. So she was always in the back of my mind. I continued on with my charity work in both her name as well as in other endeavors that I had done because it was important to me. But I would always say that I probably always was my motivating factor. I always strive to do the best that I can for myself. Also, going back to my childhood, my parents provided a very, very well-rounded and exciting life. And I kept thinking throughout my high school, college, and law school career, how am I going to make enough money to continue to just do the things that I got used to, as well as to build upon them? And so always wanting more was a huge motivating factor for myself.
And so you started the Haynes Law right off college, so to speak. And how did you even start the firm? Did you have any idea on how to start a business? Because yes, you are a lawyer by that point. You passed the bar, but what about business knowledge, right? So there's completely blank slate. So how did you acquire all of that knowledge of business to start a business and to even grow the business, your first client? So
with regards to the Haynes Law Firm came to fruition actually in 2018. Prior to that, I was in a partnership with another lawyer, and her and I started Bristol and Haynes. And to be honest, we figured that out on our own from scratch. Neither one of us had a business degree. Both of us had done very well in college as well as in law school. And we both were willing to put in the work to do the research and to really put in the hours to build our business. To say that it was easy for the first 5 years would be completely disingenuous of me. But I will say that, we stumbled, but we would always adjust and pivot. If something didn't work, we would try something new. If something did work, we would hone our skills and make it an even better endeavor. With regards to the business knowledge, there is no better business knowledge that you're going to get than to jump in head first and, get your feet wet. And that's what we did. We took on cases for next to nothing because we knew that we needed to get the experience. No one was going to hire us and pay us top dollar when we had been an attorney for 5 minutes. And so we would take the cases that no one else would take because they had trial tomorrow. We would take cases, on an extremely low budget because they knew that they were going to get someone with at least some knowledge versus paying someone for the vast amount of knowledge that, top dollar got them. And we basically, not begged, but we politely asked everyone in our life to, pass our name along and refer us. And slowly but surely we were able to get our name out there. And I guess our hard work spoke in volumes.
Do you recall your very, very first client?
I do.
I'm sure that there's a story behind it. And also, you might have felt a little bit of nervousness during that time. So tell us more about that story of the first client. So
at the time I was living in Rancho and I had a roommate. I had lived with my roommate for, at this point, 3 years. So I had a very good rapport with him, and he worked for a local construction company as one of their surveyors. And so he had a good rapport with his boss, the owner of the company, and they were going through a construction default case. Why I thought that it was ever a good idea to take on this case, I'll never know. I had never learned anything about construction default cases or defect cases in law school. I knew nothing about complex cases, and civil litigation is probably the most intimidating place that a brand new lawyer can go. A lot of civil litigation includes huge billboard named attorneys, people that get paid $1,000 an hour. But he pitched our office to his boss on an extremely limited budget, and they could see the benefit that I lived with one of their employees, so I wasn't going to not try my hardest, and that we were going to charge them pennies on the dollar. And so we took their case. And my very first court appearance was in the complex civil litigation courthouse in LA. One, I didn't even know that there was a special courthouse for these types of cases. Two, I walked in and I was the only litigant with one lawyer in my H&M suit, going up against 10 other litigants who each had anywhere from 3 to 5 attorneys in Prada suits, going before a judge. And there's only 3 cases on the docket, which confused me because I said, well, we're sitting here at a 1:30 setting. That means that, there should be several cases. Needless to say, I had no idea that each one of these cases could take anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours because you have 50 attorneys arguing to a judge before a judge can make any determination. So it was a accelerated introduction to the law.
I mean, we're curious what happened, right?
Luckily, we were one of the very small subcontractors, and my specific client at that time did not really have anything to do with what the ultimate defect was. Mm-hmm. And so we were basically a small fish in this really large lawsuit. And so in that initial court appearance, which I was extremely nerve-wracking, mm-hmm. I didn't have to do much other than state my name, state why I was there, and that we didn't have a specific dog in the fight that was before the court on that day. Mm-hmm. And so I got to kind of sit back and learn a lot. Mm-hmm. I basically learned that civil litigation is not my cup of tea. Everyone is just arguing to argue. And I didn't really feel as if anyone was actually going to win at the end of this, or that some sort of justice was going to be sought or, ever found in this realm. But we did stay on that case for a period of 9 months. We were able to successfully get our clients excused from the lawsuit. We were able to show that they were not at fault. And so it was a big win for the client, and it was mm-hmm. a big win for us because we hadn't screwed up.
Yeah. And do you feel that the first case or the first client for any business is a make or break? Or do you feel like failure is part of the process, and a lot of people fail with their first client, but then recover and learn and grow from there? Or do you feel that first step is going to be important for us to succeed in business or not?
So I think that in the realm of the law, you're always going to have winners and losers, so to speak. It's slightly different or extremely different in family law because everyone loses essentially. Mm-hmm. But from a lawsuit standpoint, no matter what, so there's always going to be a loser and a winner. And it really doesn't come down to that being the determining factor on whether or not you failed or you've succeeded with a client. I think that putting in the work, doing the best thing that you can possibly do under the circumstances and getting the best outcome, regardless if it's a win or a loss, it's how much were you able to save them on the loss? Were you able to work out portions of the deal to their benefit? Because sometimes you are representing a losing client and there's nothing that you can do other than to essentially cut the losses sooner than later. Mm-hmm. And so I think that in any given business, your first client or customer is going to be super important, but it has more to do with what you're willing to give to them, what you're willing to sacrifice to be able to provide them the product or service that they have hired you for, to the best of your ability. Because I think that where a lot of people fail their first clients or fail their first customers isn't in necessarily the outcome, but more or less what they were willing to give to them. So were they willing to give them the appropriate amount of time? Did they do the amount of research that was necessary, knowing that in the beginning, that's going to be 10 times what it's going to be in 5 years, because you're going to have that vast knowledge that you don't have in the beginning. And so I think that your first client is extremely important, but I don't necessarily think that the ultimate outcome matters as much as you doing everything that you could for that client.
Yeah. Putting in the work, and totally, I can relate to a lot of it. Let's talk about the Haynes Law Group, the current law firm that you lead. Who are you serving?
So the Haynes Law Firm serves predominantly every individual who needs assistance in family law. As a certified family law specialist in California, that actually encompasses more than your standard family law attorney. So we handle divorces, child custody, child visitation, support, both support and child support, contempts, domestic violence restraining orders, juvenile dependency, which are your welfare and institution cases where CPS, who is now actually referred to as the Department of Children and Family Services, but for mainstream population, people still refer to them as CPS, conservatorships and guardianships and estate plans. And the reason why the overall heading for the Certified Family Law Specialist encompasses all of those is because they really are dealing with familial or close relationships between individuals that need to be worked out in a court of law, whether or not that's in the family court, the juvenile dependency court, or the probate court. That's what we offer to our clients.
A lot of the people out there probably listening to this will argue that in this age of DIY, we can open ChatGPT and ask questions and stuff. What would you say to those people?
So with regards to that statement, we quite often get that statement in our consultations pretty much every single day. Can I do this on my own? And the answer is yes. Day in and day out, hundreds of people come to court without an attorney, having filed their own paperwork and are arguing their own case in front of judges. And I equate it to the same analogy as I can do the plumbing in my house. One, it's going to take me much longer than a certified plumber. Two, there is much more room for error if I do it. It might seem like it's working currently, but the longevity could not be there. Additionally, I could come to a position in the plumbing that I have no idea how to fix, and I could make it worse. So yes, we are in a time of ultimate information, and ChatGPT is a very, very knowledgeable resource. The problem is that you're not going to be able to use ChatGPT when you're making arguments in front of the judge.
Yeah, and there's funny stories about that.
You're not going to be able to combat a lawyer's argument because you're not going to know what the other side is going to say. It's going to take you much longer just because the process is that way.
Yeah.
Even if you use ChatGPT doesn't always know when the court has changed a form or the court has changed a local rule or that a court has received a different judge who does things differently. So yes, you can absolutely do it on your own and you could be successful. The likelihood that it's going to happen on the schedule that you want it to happen and that every single thing is going to go right the entire time is unlikely. And that's where my law firm is there to help. I know how to combat other litigants as well as other attorneys' arguments in court. I can think well on my feet. I know all of the facts of the case, but most importantly, when you are emotionally involved in your own case, you can't think rationally and you can't think about what the judge really is there to analyze because you're emotionally involved. You're going to argue from the stance that your viewpoint is right because that's what you believe is right within your own case. And sometimes that can be people's downfall. And so, yes, you can do it, but you run the risk of arguing the wrong things because they're important to you, but they're not important to your case.
Yeah. And I have two real life examples to prove your point. One is I know someone who tried to get their divorce by themselves. And it took so long and frustrating. And, they were confused and lost that they don't know what they're doing and what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. And it took so long than it should be. And another is an immigration case. My friend and I came to the U.S. at the same time. He chose to handle it himself. I chose to hire a lawyer. I got my paperwork so much faster. And it's the same kind of situation. There's nothing different. It's just that he decided to save that $4,000 or whatever. And I decided to invest. And totally different outcomes. So I totally agree with you. Moving on to there's a lot of, if I go to Google, there's hundreds of divorce lawyers or family lawyers. What sets the Haynes Law apart?
So this is something that I have tried to craft since the day Bristol and Haynes existed up into obviously now the Haynes Law Firm. I have strived my entire career to be the person that's going to do the hard work. I'm going to read the cases that come down from the appellate courts. I'm going to make sure to pride myself on knowing when the rules of court change, when the forms change, when statutes change, and how they apply to each one of our cases. And so you're going to be able to have a real life boutique feel coming into my law firm. You're going to speak to real people. You're going to have one-on-one time with me as a lawyer. And you're going to have the guarantee that I'm going to read every single thing that comes into my office and goes out of it, which is the most important, because that's the way that I can gather facts for your case. Family law is not law-driven. Family law is a whole set of laws and statutes and cases that make up the umbrella rules that the gray areas are then ruled upon. So in civil litigation, a rule is a rule, which means that if you committed a tort against someone, there's going to be X amount of liability. In criminal law, if you break the law and they can prove the elements, you're going to be found guilty and suffer the consequences. In family law, we have very vague concepts such as the best interest standard. Well, the best interest standard is going to be determined by the facts. So family law is fact-driven. So in my law firm, as a boutique law firm, we're going to know the facts of your case inside and out. If you were my client 5 years ago and you call back and you need to hire us again for something new, I'm going to remember all of the facts of your case because I handled your case personally. So you're going to have that boutique feel, but you're going to have the same knowledge and commitment as hiring one of the big corporate law firms, because I pride myself on doing the research, but more importantly, knowing the facts of your case and knowing why it's important.
And in our collaboration as well, you promised the listeners to have more podcasts like these where you're going to tackle the latest updates on different laws. I'm not sure, but what can you say about the future program that we're planning to do together?
Yes. And so what I want to be able to do is to provide a platform of legal knowledge that's going to help not only my own clients, because that's obviously of utmost importance to me, but to provide a platform and a community for people to actually know what's going on and what changes are occurring in the case law. So the Family Law Code is the overall governing body of law, but each one of those statutes are analyzed and evaluated using a huge, unlimited case law history that goes back to the beginning of our country. And so on a day-to-day basis, the appellate court are hearing family law cases to determine whether or not there needs to be a change in the law, whether or not there's a new exception to the rule, whether or not that they're going to come up with a new set of standards to be able to analyze cases. And most of these cases are not publicized enough to where the vast population knows about them or knows how to use them to benefit their case. There are even huge cases out there, such as La Mouche, which deals with move-away cases, that people have heard the name, but they don't know how it applies to their case. They don't know how to use it in their pleadings, and they don't know actually what it means. So in our future podcasts, it's going to be a part of my job to bring to the community this knowledge and these new cases. I'm going to analyze the big target name cases that litigants are going to hear in court that attorneys are using, as well as the new ones that could affect their cases. Because if you can bring to the judge's attention that there's a case that came down that coincides with the facts of your case, and this was the outcome, a judge has to rule the same. But so many people don't know that there's cases out there like that their cases get ruled upon using just general principles, which can be persuaded one way or the other, because again, it's a gray area. So I want to be able to show people that, one, I have the knowledge individually, but two, that if you listen to this podcast, that you're going to gain the legal knowledge yourself that can help you if you choose to go at it and do your plumbing yourself.
I love it. Yeah, we're excited for this. A case that really touched you.
I think that the cases that really speak volumes to me are always the ones that deal with children. Children are the ones who lose 100% when you're dealing with family law. Their lives have already been impacted. But protecting children or getting the outcome for children that really reigns true, that should actually be the outcome, is what matters to me. And about, I believe now 3 years ago, I took a case and I told my client or potential client at that time, if I take your case, this is going to be what I tell clients is a Hail Mary. And that meant that she had been going at it alone for a very long time in her juvenile dependency matter, which is the cases involving the Department of Children and Family Services. And I told her, if you do nothing, you know what the outcome is. But if we try this, again, it's a Hail Mary. And if it's caught, you're going to be successful. But as in with every Hail Mary, there's a large chance it's going to fail. And we stuck at it for year after year with social worker after social worker, with extremely difficult foster parents, 2 different counties, both Riverside and Placer County, and a whole slew of case law that did not help my client. But my client stayed true to herself and she did the work, and we got the outcome of allowing for her child to come back and reunify with her after she was not offered reunification services for the first 22 months of this child's life. And now today, this child lives with her mom. She's able to parent her and make decisions for her, and she has no oversight from any county or social worker, and she got to have the chance that she rightfully deserved because I was able to persuade a judge to actually listen to what the Welfare and Institutions Code required, rather than a judge listening to a social worker basically say, this is what I want to have happen, and a judge listening. A judge finally did what was right under the circumstances.
Fascinating. I mean, my wife and I watched Lincoln Lawyer on Netflix, and we love it. Like, this is one of our favorite shows. And my question to you, when you have a big win like that, how do you celebrate?
It really just kind of depends. I really like to celebrate the team members in my office that have, made a huge impact in the case and the case's outcome. We have this thing called kudos in our office. And so anytime we have a huge, big win, I like to have them share in it. So I always give kudos to the team member that is the lead case manager on the case wherein we win. And usually I'll just celebrate with my husband thereafter. But I always want to make sure that the case manager gets the recognition that they deserve.
Beautiful. So your firm is based in Redlands, California. How do you like Redlands and the Inland Empire in general? How's it like to do business in this area?
I love doing business in this area. I went to college in Long Beach. I loved living there, but LA County, Orange County are not as amicable to business owners. They're really hard to break into the legal system. And while I know that people outside of San Bernardino County will say that there is the quote unquote good old boys club here as well, or out of towners. But I went to Laverne Law School. And so I had a lot of relationships with the legal community before I started doing business here. And so I enjoyed being able to join this legal community and get to know other lawyers in the area and to practice here. I wholeheartedly believe that the Inland Empire, San Bernardino, and Riverside counties are the best place to practice as a family law attorney. It's not as easy to make close relationships with the legal community in, say, LA County or even Orange County because of just the vast amount of lawyers in LA, as well as the vast amount of courtrooms at Stanley Mosque. And nowadays, LA County and Orange County are basically all online. So you don't really have that friendly faces that you can see to ask questions in the courthouse, wherein San Bernardino and Riverside are much more community-based.
And life here?
And life here, I live in Calamasa, so it's very close to Redlands. And prior to moving to Calamasa, I actually lived in Redlands for 7 years prior. I loved Redlands. I think that the community as a whole is wonderful. I love that they are trying extremely hard to not allow for large city influence to come in and put in high rises. I know that the community is striving really hard to keep our two-story realm, just to keep the small community aspect. I also love that, that there's a lot of community events in Redlands. And so it's a great place to, live and work at the same time.
Fantastic. So last question, how can people find out more about you, get in touch with your firm?
They can find me on our website, which is CristaHaynesLaw.com. We're also on Facebook, the Haynes Law Firm. Instagram is also the Haynes Law Firm.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for taking time and for all the insights and the wisdom that you shared.
Well, thank you very much for having me today.